I'm from Manchester in the UK.
And my understanding is that there's a big referendum taking place to your northwest,
Yeah,
northeast.
north of the border, if you can call it a border. At the moment, there's not really a border there. But hopefully there will be a border soon. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen based on the votes today.
Oh, really? And so votes are coming in. I guess you're 7 hours ahead of us, and polls don't close for another couple hours. So do me a favor, just back off the mic a little bit and tell me why it appears that the independence vote is coming in as a no.
Well, there's numerous reasons. I think one of the biggest reasons is that most of the media in the UK is part of the establishment, and the establishment are obviously against the independence vote. So the BBC, I mean, British is in the BBC's name. The BBC is meant to be neutral, but has a no slant to it, and all the national newspapers have gone no. Rupert Murdoch didn't swing his weight behind either campaign, and there's only one newspaper in Scotland, which is run out of Glasgow, which has actually gone enthusiastically behind the Yes campaign.
And so wait, so why do you assume that the vote has gone against the Yes campaign?
The bookies have already paid out on the No campaign. The stock markets for the Scottish-based banks have already started rallying, assuming there's a no vote. So I'm just following where the money is. There's a lot of emotion behind the Yes vote, but it looks like all the people with any money invested in it are already paying out, expecting it to be no. And though there's not really exit polls for this election. No media have decided to invest in getting any exit polls, but just from the looks of it, it looks like it's going to be the latest polls have got the no votes like 6 points ahead going into today. So it'll be a big. I mean, if it goes yes, it'll be a big swing to the yes vote from the latest polls.
All right. Well, I guess we will find out soon. But in your
it's a win either way, though.
In what way?
It's a big because this has been the first time in my lifetime, for a long time, where people have actually looked at it and looked at where the rules are made of how societies. We don't have a written constitution in this country, so when something happens constitutionally to our country, nobody really knows what is meant to happen, and the establishment, the people in power at the time, just make up the rules as they go along. And this is a case in point. Salmond and Cameron a few years ago and their teams basically hammered out this agreement that it was possible for Scotland to succeed from the Union, whereas in America it's written into your constitution that states can't do that. And everybody knows where they stand. In this country, and to get that agreement between these two people with influence and part of the establishment in power, one of them said, "Oh, can we have 16-year-olds voting?" And the other person said, "Oh yeah, we'll have 16-year-olds voting." That's the first time 16-year-olds have ever voted anywhere in the UK, and they just made it up, and they made it up as they're going along and wrote it into law. Obviously, they passed the laws to enable the referendum to take place, but it's a win because people have had a look at the Constitution of the United Kingdom through this process, and there's a lot of people saying, well, who is deciding what is and isn't allowed? Who is deciding who is allowed to be in power and who isn't allowed to be in power? And a lot of people are realizing that we have got unelected religious clerics in our upper house in the UK, people are taking a much closer look at what's actually going on behind the scenes, just behind the day-to-day party political wrangling. What's actually going on?
Is it your sense that there's going to be some organizing around this? I mean, that's all well and good that it has drawn attention to sort of the some of the less democratic systems, I guess, in Great Britain. Is there any indication that there's going to be some organizing or some type of reform push, following this that basically says, hey, we need something that's a little bit more accountable and not just a function of two guys, sharing a pint together and deciding, 16-year-olds can vote?
Yeah, so there's nothing official yet, but this vote, whatever's happened, this vote is close enough now, and the momentum is there in Scotland, and it's picking up in the rest of the country, that I think there is going to be a movement, a grassroots movement, to examine the political system in this country, and I think we will see change. I mean, we've been trying successive prime ministers and people within the establishment knows it's undemocratic, and they've been trying to reform the House of Lords for literally over 100 years. We've had prime ministers promising that they're going to reform the House of Lords, and it just never happens, because you've got the two or three main political parties, and it's just not in their interest to change the system how it's set up. And what would have happened in Scotland if they'd have gone to the yes, if they'd gone independent and they'd gone to the yes vote, is they would have to look at their system and say, right, what is our lower and upper house going to look like? What is our constitution going to look like? And although we've got the European Human Rights Convention, which is part of our kind of officially part of our constitution over here. That would be a starting point, but what comes after that?
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, you'd think that just having it called House of Lords would be enough for people to say, I don't like that. But it's interesting that it's gotten that conversation going in that way. I hadn't even really. I mean, I think to a certain extent, in this country, we take it. It's very easy to take the Constitution for granted. I mean, at least, despite the fact that there are ways in which it is interpreted by the Supreme Court in ways which, at different times, different people have problems with the interpretation. At least we have some place to go, I guess.
Yeah.
When we have these type of questions.
So, like at the moment, if in this country, everything is a constitutional crisis. What if Prince Harry or the Prince George or whatever? What if he wants to marry a Catholic? Well, at the present, it's against the law in this country for for the royal family to be Catholic, and it's kind of against the law for the Prime Minister to be Catholic. Though Tony Blair waited until he was out of office a few years until he converted to Catholicism, and we just don't. Whereas in the United States, you basically have the separation of the religion and state and religion. Although people get confused about what that means and try and bend it, everybody knows where they stand. In this country, it's literally just made up as we go along, based on 1,000 years of tradition.
Interesting. All right. Well, Nathan Ray, I really appreciate the insight, and thanks for calling in.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's my wife is Scottish, but she doesn't get a vote because we don't live in Scotland. But it's interesting for us.
Yeah, it's a bizarre dynamic, but I appreciate.
Yeah, well, it's not a Scottish vote. It's a vote for the people who reside in Scotland. So if you're a Polish person who just happens to live in Glasgow, you get a vote. If you were born and raised in Edinburgh and moved south 2 miles over the border a few years ago, you don't get a vote. It's a weird system. But like I said, it was kind of made up as we went along.
But what if like one of the sides, decided, this has been coming for a long time, bust in a bunch of people, give them a temporary residence, they would be able to vote for this?
If you sorry, Matt, I didn't quite hear you there. But just to say that in the UK, because we're part of the European Union, if you have residence if you're a member of the European Union, you live in the UK, you get to vote in certain elections. You can vote in the local elections.
But could have a bunch of people just moved up to Scotland temporarily? I mean, how long did you have to reside there to vote?
You have to be on the vote. You have to be on the register of voters in the locality where you're living, and so you actually have to be a resident there. And they close that off. I think it's like a month and a half before, or a month before each election. They close the register of voting for new voters. So I know in America in some states you can register to vote and vote on the same day. You can't do that in the UK. But anybody, if you live in that place and you're a member of the EU, and there are a couple of other countries that are also included, you can do that.
Interesting.
As long as you're living there.
All right. Well, thanks for the call, buddy.
Yeah. Well, it's great. I know there's not many listeners in the UK, but I listen every day.
Oh, that's not true. We got a bunch. I appreciate the call. All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay. Catch you later. Bye.